Okay, so if you've got a copy of the scriptures, would you grab it and turn to Psalm 100? We're in our Summer of Psalms series. We do this every summer. Ryan is back in the house. Give a big shout out to Ryan. So he'll be up here at the end of the service, bingoing our way as we shuffle through the songbook of Jesus. And he'll be preaching next weekend, which will be awesome. So we do this sort of randomly, and we randomly selected Psalm 100 for this morning, which is like jackpot for me because it was only 5 verses. Okay, so let me read that, and then we'll try to understand what this is telling us about how to pray, how to live in God's world as worshipers. Okay, so here we go. Psalm 100. And if you don't have a Bible, there's one of these in the seat back in front of you. We'll also throw it on the screen. But it goes like this: a psalm of thanksgiving. Let the whole earth shout triumphantly to the Lord. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us, and we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and bless his name, for the Lord is good, and his faithful love endures forever. His faithfulness through all generations. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now, there's something that I want to show you, and it's almost easier the shorter the song is, right? To show you a flow of life as God intended it that just jumps off the page when you read this psalm. You may or may not have noticed it, but I want to show it to you, and I want to show you that this is so rooted in the very fundamental nature of how human beings act and worship in the world that I want to take you to the very first romance. Do you know where it is? I teach this every time. It's the first session. Some of you have done premarital sessions with me. The very first session, Genesis chapter 2. So if you got your Bible, you want to turn to Genesis chapter 2. That's just the second chapter in the Bible, so it's going to be right at the beginning. And I'm going to show you this flow or progression that leads to worship, okay? And I'm going to tell you in this psalm, because it's clear from Psalm 100, this progression is meant to be directed ultimately to God. But you see it played out in other areas of life. And we see it right here in the area of male and female romance, okay? So this is how it's going to go. In Genesis 1, we have what I call the 30,000-foot view of creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, okay? And then in chapter 2, it zooms in and retells the account of the creation of human beings as the pinnacle of God's creative work. So God said all of creation is good, and then he said of human beings, the male and female created in the image of God, he said that's very good. And so then chapter 2 zooms in to this dance of creation that's happened from God creating man first and then woman. So God is going to take a rib from Adam's side, and he gives him, he puts him to sleep first, don't worry. And from that he forms the woman, okay? So pick it up with me in Genesis 2:21. It says, "So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to come over the man, and he slept. And God took one of his ribs and closed the flesh at that place. Then the Lord God made the rib he had taken from the man into a woman and brought her to the man. And the man said, 'This one at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. This one will be called woman, for she was taken from man.' This is why a man leaves his father and mother and bonds with his wife, and they become one flesh. Both the man and his wife were naked and felt no shame." And so here we have a beautiful picture of what I'm going to try to explain to you today that happens in every area of life and is meant to be fully and most effectively geared towards our worship of God. And the thing we have here is the progression from education to exultation, E-X-U-L-T, then to exaltation, okay? And we have it right here. And I wanted to bring this up because some of you might think, well, how am I supposed to do this in real life? And most of us do this in romantic relationships. And so all I'm going to try to tell you to do today is to take that thing that you already know how to do and turn it towards your Maker, God Himself. That's what Psalm 100 is going to tell us to do. So look at what Adam does. Again, all things are sourced from God, and God creates the perfect partner for him. Okay? Not just because he was lonely, or not just because he needed nice things, but because he could not accomplish the work God had given him to do without this perfect partner. And so when God creates the woman, just as he created man from the raw material of the earth, he creates the woman and brings the woman before the man, something amazing happens. The first thing is education. God doesn't just bring this idea to Adam, he brings the real thing, the observable, seeable, touchable, understandable, slightly understandable woman. That's okay. Okay. You'll never get there, man. It's a lifelong endeavor. That's what I tell people in premarital. If you ever come to me and said you're bored in your marriage, you've gotten off track because it's a lifelong education that you're in. You will never graduate. You just keep working at it. You keep trying to learn more and more. But Adam sees her, observes her, and his education begins. Okay? But he has to actually encounter the real thing that's really there. And he has to start to learn about her. But the first thing he learns is pretty amazing. He sees this is exactly what he needs. Okay? So, what happens next? What happens next? Well, actually, I want to argue that what happens next is something deep in his soul, in his heart. It's an internal thing that happens. Because all that he's been looking for, because right before this, God brings all the animals he's created before the man and says, hey, see if you can find for yourself a perfect partner. And he can't, for a number of reasons. And so his heart is low until God, always knowing that he would do this, God creates the perfect partner for this glory-creating endeavor that he's called Adam 2. And so his heart is the first thing that's transformed. And I call that exaltation. Or I don't call it that. That's what exaltation is. And exaltation is different than exaltation. So let me give you the definitions here. Education is the act or the process of imparting knowledge or skills to another. Okay, so God is educating Adam in what he needs by bringing before him this woman. And he is imparting this knowledge of the perfect partner to him. And that education that Adam begins turns into exultation, exultation. That is a feeling of triumphant elation or jubilation. That's what exultation is. It's a feeling of triumphant elation or jubilation. It's the act of delighting in or feeling and expressing joy. Okay, so this is different than exaltation. So exaltation. Exaltation is the act of raising someone or something in importance. It's the action of elevating someone in rank, power, or character. Okay? So you see, there's a nuance here. They're all related, and specifically exaltation and exaltation, they're very close, right? And you say, well, what's the difference? Well, one is rooted in a feeling, the internal joy or desire to joy. One is rooted in the act of or the action of raising someone up or exalting someone. And we have both of those right here in Genesis 2. The education begins and the man's heart begins to sing. How do we know this? How do we know this? Well, if you've got a copy of the scriptures, you can see it. I'll show you mine. Anytime you see an indent in the Old Testament or the New Testament, you know that the Hebrew, which is what is originally written in, is actually Hebrew poetry. Now, you write poetry because your heart can't help but express the thing that you've learned in a way that brings it great joy and brings the joy into the public arena. That's what poetry or song is, right? And so I always teach this when I do premarital. It's like, this is what happens to every man when he finds the woman he loves. He can't help but buy a guitar, learn enough songs to sing to her, and sit outside of her dorm room and try to play. It's like that thing I never used to do. Like, this is my story, by the way. I never used to do this, but I'm going to go learn to do it because I can't even express how much joy you bring me without doing it in song and verse. And it happens right here. It's built in. This is what happens when our heart is so affected by the education, by the growing in knowledge of a beautiful thing and the thing that's just what it's meant to be. We can't help but have our heart so changed and affected, the feelings must pour themselves out in exaltation, which is the public expression of that joy that we feel within. And here we have the very first love song ever written. And it is, in fact, both a love song for the woman, but also ultimately for God himself. God, I can't believe what you've done. I can't believe you found and created for me this perfect partner so that I might accomplish all that you've given me to do. Wow, God, you're amazing, right? So all true exaltation is also glorification of God. It lifts him high. It furthers people's understanding of who God is. It puts him and elevates his rank in our priority of thought and action. And so there's an example. You see the flow? The education leads to the heart, a feeling, and the feeling can't help but stay in, and so much express itself outwardly, and it exalts that which it sings about. Now, this same thing happens in Psalm 100. So turn back with me to Psalm 100. And I want to show you this. Now, in the text, and I wish it had just done it exactly in the order I'd said, education, exaltation, exaltation, but actually does it in reverse because poets do whatever they want, okay? That's the one thing you realize. They do whatever they want. Okay, so it's going to start with the exaltation, but it's going to tell you why they're exalting. Okay, ready? It says, let the whole earth shout triumphantly to the Lord. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Okay? Now, it doesn't just say come before him with songs. It says come before him with joyful songs. So in that phrase, joyful songs, you have both exultation, joy, and songs, exaltation, the actual action of elevating. And so you read that, you say, okay, so I should just do that, right? That's a command. Well, yes, it's a command, but it isn't a command rooted in just do this or you're in trouble. What is it rooted in? Look at the very next verse, verse 3. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. That word acknowledge in most translations, most English translations, is know. Well, you say like, okay, I'm supposed to sing this stuff. I'm supposed to serve God with gladness. Gladness is a heart word, isn't it? That's exaltation with gladness. I'm supposed to do this. And then he tells you why. Know that the Lord is God, that he made us, and that we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. That's education. I must know that the Lord is God. I must know that he made us. I must know that we are his people. I must know that we are the sheep of his pastures. So that's an education. So really what's happening here is without that education, and know or acknowledge is also an imperative. You must know in order to do what you also must do, which is triumphantly shout to the Lord and serve the Lord with gladness and come before him with songs, joyful songs. You must know first who he is. Okay, so that's sort of the first connection point, and then he's going to repeat the same process. Look at it again, verse 4. Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Enter his gates. That is an action of exaltation. You are going into his place, and here they're thinking about the temple. Now the temple is spread out across the world, but here the temple was someplace they could go as an act of exaltation, like going to stand before the throne of God. That tells people God is king. So it says, enter his gates with thanksgiving. So it's not just going to go, but have thanksgiving in your heart, a form of exaltation. And enter his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and bless his name. So those are things you're supposed to do that exalt God as King and Lord over the universe and over your life. And why do you do this? Look at verse 5. For, and you could bring down know into that because it's the same progression here. For know that the Lord is good, and his faithful love endures forever. His faithfulness through all generations. So we do those things because we know that God is good. His faithful love endures forever. And so it's our education in who God is that leads to our exultation, which is our thankfulness, our gladness, our joy, that leads to these acts of exaltation, which lift God and blesses his name in all the world. Do you see that? This is the simplest pattern of how life works. Education and who God is leads to exaltation, the changing of our heart, which flows through to the exaltation and lifting him higher, making his name great, letting the whole world know that he's the center of it all. And so that's the big idea for today, that exaltation can only happen to its fullest degree if education and true knowledge of the true God precedes it. This knowledge or awareness leads to the changing of one's affections and the discovery of the real, true feelings for the God who is there. These new feelings of joy and gladness and gratitude then flow from the internal to the external by the raising up of verbal praise, thanksgiving, and song. And all these things are necessarily public. So we enter into God's presence in prayer, or the places of his progeny, like the temple or the church, that is places that only exist because God is who he is. Like Sideris Church doesn't just exist, it exists because of God and who God is and what he is like. So this is a place of his progeny. So this is a public place. Then our songs of praise can be expressed publicly, and the person behind these words that inspired these words is exalted and raised into the consciousness and awareness and up the priority lists of those within earshot. Ergo, exalted, elevated, and made famous. That's why we exist. Okay. So do you want to practice this with me? Let's practice this process. Okay, look at verse 3 again. Education. Verse 3, this Hebrew word for acknowledge is an imperative. That means it's a command. It's second person, and it's plural. So it's saying all of y'all need to get educated on this God. You need to know, notice, hear of, learn, have revealed to you, and realize who this God of the Scriptures is. This is an imperative. You must do this. So what are we to know or acknowledge about God? Well, the first thing we see there in verse 3 is this: that the Lord is God. It's going to seem kind of simple, but it's super important. We need to know that God exists. It's no small thing to defend the existence of God. This truth has been under attack for quite some time now, particularly in the West, in the Enlightenment, through to our day. And it's been so effective, this attack on God's existence, that even for us in the church, we sometimes, is he really there? So this is where classic apologetics comes in. Apologetics is just a fancy word for the defense of the Christian faith. So giving a defense of the Christian faith, and many Christian philosophers and others have come up over the centuries with defenses for this very simple but foundational truth that God in fact exists, that he's not just an idea that's nice and makes us feel good. He's not an opioid for the masses. He actually is there. And there's real good evidence for that can be defended in the court of big ideas, and we don't have to run and hide from intellectual conversations because there's arguments for God's existence. One of those arguments is called the cosmological argument, which goes something like this: that the universe began to exist, and therefore someone must have started the flame. The Big Bang is evidence that we can use, evidence that proves that the universe is expanding, and if it's expanding, then it must have started. And so there's a couple forms of the cosmological argument. The first is, or one of my favorites, is called the Kalam cosmological argument, K-A-L-A-M. You can look these things up. And it argues that everything that begins to exist has a cause, and the universe began to exist. We know this from the Big Bang. Therefore, the universe has a cause. And that cause is, the best explanation is, God, the only uncaused being in all of existence, which is what the scriptures have been telling us. In the beginning, God did something. He created the heavens and the earth. The only uncaused cause in the universe is God. There's also Aquinas' argument. It's very similar. It goes like this. It explains that everything in motion has a mover, and the chain of movers must ultimately lead to an unmoving mover, which is God, right? So cause and effect. So, the domino effect. Well, somebody's got to push the first domino. So that really fits in with whatever view of the universe you have. Is you always get back down the chain of events as far back as you can go that somebody must have pushed the first domino. Okay, so that's the cosmological argument. You can go look more, study on that. I've got lots of resources if you ever want to dig into this. Another argument is, I don't know about all the cosmology and things like that. I'm no Ryan Farrell. You should talk to Ryan, Pastor Ryan. He's got his undergrad in this kind of stuff. He can tell you all about it, right, Ryan? Where are you, Ryan? Oh, yeah. Balcony culture. I love it. Okay, so, Ryan will answer all your questions about the universe. Okay, so he gets his undergrad in this. Okay, so for the philosophically minded, you've got to come to me for this. Ryan's not going to help you with this one. There is an a priori philosophical argument. A priori just means it's a type of knowledge that is independent of sensory experience and can be known to be true through reason and logic alone. It's an a priori argument. And it's called the ontological argument. So you can look this one up as well. But it proposes that the very concept of God, defined as a perfect being, logically necessitates God's existence. You spinning yet? This one will spin you out, but I like it. Okay, so here's how it goes, something like I'm not going to be able to do it justice. Look it up, research it. I got things you can read on this, but I want you to think of the greatest possible being. Just take a few seconds. What would the greatest possible being be like? What attributes? Are you thinking of something? Perhaps something that could create the universe as we know it and hold it together and sustain it. something that could create and design the eyeball and all that it does. I don't know what you're thinking about, but are you thinking that the greatest possible being would also exist? And it's not just an idea. Which brings you to the question, is it greater to exist than to not exist? I think existing is a greater quality than not existing. Some might disagree. Then if there is the greatest possible being in the universe, this being must exist rather than not exist, if it's the greatest that we can conceive of. This is the ontological argument. In logical form, it goes something like this. God is, by definition, the greatest conceivable being. For if we could conceive of a greater being, then that being that we conceived of would be greater than God. So if God is, by definition, the greatest conceivable being, premise one. Premise two, a being that exists is in reality is greater than a being that exists only in the mind. Therefore, God must exist in reality to be the greatest. Now you say, whew, to think about that one. Yeah. And there, you could, if you look this stuff up, there's, people will push back on arguments and say, well, that's no good reason to believe in God. And the answer is, well, that's not the only reason to believe in God. But the more you think about it, you might just say, that is helpful. For how could I conceive of a being that is greater, that doesn't exist? Maybe then I'm the greatest being that exists. That's no place I want to be. A third argument that I enjoy that's in classic apologetics for the existence of God is called the teleological argument, or teleological argument. Or one particular branch of that is called the fine-tuning argument, which is actually a mathematical argument for God. And if you want an explanation of this, you're going to have to go to Joseph Cox, one of the elders here. So you go to Ryan for the stars, you go to me for the philosophy, you go to Joseph for the math. Okay. So it's a mathematical argument for God, basically, because it documents the mathematical absurdity that a universe and planet like ours could actually exist. The numbers are so outrageous. The probability that all the things that must be constants in our world are constants in our world so that life as we know it can exist as we know it. That the universe's fundamental constants, like the strength of gravity or the speed of light, they appear to be set within this extremely narrow range that are necessary for life as we know it to exist. And if these constants were even slightly different, the universe would either collapse in on itself or expand too rapidly, preventing the formation of stars, galaxies, and the complexity of chemistry required for life. How could it be so finely tuned? Now, I think one of the strongest proofs that this is a good argument for God is the countering theory that you have to come up with to explain the math. Okay, so the math is the math. That's what I love about math. It is what it is. I don't understand most of it, but there are people that are. His name's Joseph. You talk to Joseph. But the math is what it is, and so philosophers and scientists that don't want to believe in God, they have to come up with the countering theory or a competing theory that explains the math. Do you know what the competing theory is? It's called the multiverse. And you've probably seen movies about it. It's gotten into the zeitgeist. I said that because I was asking these guys in the sound booth, can I redefine zeitgeist? I want to create a Sideris zeitgeist. Okay, anyhow. But the is in the zeitgeist, meaning Spider-Man's in the multiverse, every Marvel comic character. I don't think the original writers of the comics had them in the multiverse, but now everyone's in the multiverse, okay? Anybody seen the show Dark Matter or read the book Dark Matter? Yeah, wild stuff. I'm watching that. Whew. Okay, what's the multiverse if you don't know? It's that, listen, the math tells us there's no way this universe could exist unless there are almost infinite numbers of other possible universes that are out there that have some different, dials on the universal constants and laws themselves. And so the only way the math works out is as if there really is, behind it all, some cosmic universe generator that's just cranking out universes, and we just happen to be in the one that has the perfect set of credentials to lead to Dave standing up here talking to you, talking about math that he doesn't know anything about. But there could be a Dave somewhere else who knows everything about math, and you'd have to go to Joseph for philosophy, but you'd always have to go to Ryan to talk about the stars. There's perhaps a constant. You see, you guys know about the multiverse. What's easier to believe? That there are infinite number of universes and versions of Dave and versions of you that exist all throughout some cosmic something, or that there's a God who has fine-tuned the universe in such a way to create life as we know it? What takes more faith? As for me and my family, we'll worship the maker of heaven and earth. And so, there's just 3 little examples of how we educate ourselves and reinforce that which we might know through some other means. There's many evidences that God exists, including religious experience, including the resurrection of Jesus Christ. There's so many things that you could turn to, but those are 3 big ones, just for that there is a higher power that exists, a maker of this all. But all the evidence is forming a cumulative case for the existence of God. Now, let's just say that you did all that study and you learned all these things and you reinforced something that maybe you grew up knowing or you came to know later in life or you're always wrestling with, and you're using this type of education, this type of study and learning, and it's effective. And you start to believe, God really does exist. And it starts to be formative. Now, what feelings would flow out of that true education? What would knowing that there's a God who has fine-tuned the universe in such a way, and let's just imagine you were as smart as Joseph and you understood the math, and you were smart as Ryan and you understood the Big Bang Theory, and you may just be crazy enough to dive into the ontological argument like I like, and you start to do that. What feelings would that elicit or evoke or bring to life in you? Well, I think for me, and probably for you, it would make you very glad. The feeling of relief, the feeling of wow, the feeling of wonder, the feeling of holy smokes, I'm small, but God is great. This feeling of gladness that the psalmist talks about. Oh, I'm so glad that I'm not just living in an accidental runaway train. I'm so glad. And this is exultation. Like I'm having a real change of heart. My heart is softening. My fear is dwindling. And this exultation should then lead me to exaltation. And sing out loud, great is our God, like we sang. Great is our God. And I've got to tell everybody, this God is real. He exists. He's not just an idea. He's amazing. The universe He has created is amazing. How much more amazing this God who created it? Exaltation. Who's lifted high right now? God Himself. But I needed the education to lead me to the exaltation. But I couldn't skip exultation because I had to allow the information to change my heart so that my exaltation could be pure and true and authentic. Okay, let's try it again. You ready? We don't just want to know that a higher power exists. That's helpful. That does lead to exaltation, but the process must continue. What else must we know about or would help to know about? This God who exists. Look at verse 3. So we acknowledge or know that the Lord is God, but buried in there is a little hint. Who's God? The Lord. And anytime you see in the Old Testament, capital L-O-R-D in most translation, that's telling you that in the original Hebrew, it's actually the personal name of God, which God gives to Moses at the burning bush, which is, I am that I am. Call me Yahweh. And out of reverence for God and His name, because it is so holy, the Hebrew people chose to not say His name publicly out loud. And so the English translators of that, to respect that Jewish tradition, have put in most English translations, Lord. But it's really saying Yahweh is God. So this is not just any higher power. This is Yahweh, which is the God of the Hebrews, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the God of Moses, who led the people out of Israel and out of slavery. And this God has a name, which means what? You need to know this about God. You need to know that God is personal. Why would you need a name if you weren't personal? Just call me it. Just call me the Force. No, I have a name. Call me Yahweh. I am a personal God. He is a God who showed up in real and powerful ways for the Israelites. He is a God of deliverance and justice. He is a God who hates slavery and evil. This is a particular God with particular ideas. And He does particular things because He's personal. He is a God who has design and moral law for the world, and He tells us about it. Meaning that He wants something better for us. That's good to know about God. That He's not impersonal. He's not an it. He's not just this thing. But He has purpose and plans, and it's for your good. It's good to know that Yahweh is God. Yes, there is a God, and He has a name. Okay, but not just that. Look at verse 3. What else do we need to know? We need to know that He made us. This is a profound truth. Imagine if you didn't know this. We are not accidental mutations of a biological greenhouse created by God. He made us human beings specifically, and He specifically created us in His image, Genesis tells us. Genesis 1. We are created in the image of God. Male and female, He created us in the image of God, in His likeness, to be like Him, to be the ultimate representation of who He is and what He's like in the world. We are no biological accident of trial and error. The maker of heaven and earth is also our maker. His creations all have design and purpose, and He wants those purposes to be fulfilled, which means you have purpose. You have design. You are not here by accident. You can either live into your design and purpose better or worse. I mean, think about something you have made for yourself that you could have otherwise bought at the store. Think about that. Just think, what pops into your head? Well, I could have just bought that at the store, but I made it. Think about how much more care and attention you have with that thing than the thing that you bought at the store. Like, you may bake a cake, but you made it yourself. And so you let that cake and the leftovers of that cake sit in your fridge for weeks, maybe months, because you made it. You buy that at the store, party's over, you're throwing it out, right? When you, maybe not you, maybe just eat the rest of it right there, but that's more like me. Okay, so the thing is, when you made it, you care for it. So if God made us, He cares for us in a way that we can kind of get because we're made in His image. So imagine knowing that He made us, that He made me. What does that elicit in you? What feelings come to life in you? What spawns in your heart That's exaltation. To know that you are no accident, to know that you are not just a product of uncontrollable programming and genetics, to know that your Creator had you in mind and thought of you when He designed you, and He wants to help you get back to that design. Imagine that. Know that. What changes in your heart? Now, if you're really knowing that, if you're getting a real education in that, now that's going to lead you to exalt that Creator and Maker who made you. There's a song I'll play at the end of the service if you want to stick around. I'm not going to play now. It's called The Image of God by We Are Messengers. It's a cool song. That might be the kind of song you write once you know that you were made in the image of God. You see, that's an exaltation of God that is flowing from exultation of somebody coming. Maybe they've been told, I don't know about the songwriters, maybe they've been told that their whole life, but in some moment they came to a fuller, deeper understanding of God made me. And that song was birthed in their heart, and then they put it to a tune, and then they recorded it so that the world could hear it. See the process? There's no way that song, you listen to that song, there's no way that song could be written just by somebody saying, all right, I want somebody to go write a song about Genesis 1, about the image of God. There's no way that song would have so much heart behind it, because you can't skip that middle step of exaltation. Okay, that's good to know. I got to know that in order to do all these other things that I'm called to do. Triumphantly, joyfully sing of God. Okay, verse 3 still. We are His people, the sheep of His pasture, which is to say, we need to know that God is our shepherd. Now, being educated on this idea is a bit harder for us than it would have been for the Israelites, because there was just shepherds everywhere. There were sheep everywhere. So if you want to go talk to somebody from New Zealand, they get this. But we need to do a little bit of work on, okay, what does it mean that He's our shepherd? If we want to be educated in that, that's why we've got to do the work. Listen, education takes work. If you just think you just want to flow into being a Christian and do it the right way without any education, you're sorely mistaken. Anything that's worth doing and doing well requires deep, deep work. And you have to educate yourself on who this God is. And how many hours did you study for your profession? How many hours have you studied about the God of the universe? You got to put the work in. You got to study. And so understanding what it means that He's shepherd, it's going to take some work. We've got to dig in. And if we had the time, we'd dig in deeply. But what we can know is that shepherds were these people who gave up their life for the sheep, and they would hang out in fields in the outdoors with their sheep, which means that these shepherds were not distant. They slept in the fields with their sheep. These shepherds cared deeply for their sheep. They led them to water and grass for food. And these shepherds risked. They fought off wild beasts to protect these sheep. Now, with the coming of Jesus, this Old Testament metaphor takes on real flesh, and we can know even more deeply what God's trying to say when He says, I am your shepherd. Jesus talks all the time about being the good shepherd. And then Jesus does the thing that shepherds did, right? And so our awareness and acknowledgement of God as our shepherd comes to life when we read the New Testament, and we see that Jesus, God in the flesh, the incarnate God who came and lived among us, is our shepherd. Right? Jesus literally laid His life down for His sheep, keeping the wolf that is sin at bay, keeping the bear that is death from ultimate victory, and keeping the snake that is Satan crushed under His foot. God is our shepherd. So when you come to know this about this one true God, what feelings spark the life in you? What exultation comes forth to know that God is not distant or some cold entity that could care less? To know that God is not impersonal and uncaring, but in fact has a name and He shares it with us. To know that God is not indifferent to our suffering and our pain, but in fact walked the path of suffering and pain for us. To know that God is not too other to come into our world and live among us, to make a home among us. To know that He is not beyond the risk of pain and even death, but stands face to face with it for us. This sounds like the kind of stuff that if you really knew this, you'd write songs about it. You'd write books about it. You'd write sermons about it. You'd tell your friends about it. You'd tell your kids about it. You'd tell your grandkids about it. You couldn't be stopped from exalting the name above every name. So what's stopping you? Verse 5, in this second pairing, we have some more knowledge. For the Lord is good. The Hebrew word here, tov, means good or merry, pleasant, desirable, friendly, kind, morally good. Do you know that God is not harsh? You've probably been told that He is. The world and Satan wants you to think He's a harsh God. He's brutal and judgmental. But actually, we find out that He's a friend of sinners, that His commands are for our good. They're not arbitrary. They're not meant to control us. They're meant to lead us beside still waters, that we might drink of life and life to the full. That's what they're for. He's not a slave master. He is good. And when you come to know that the Lord is good, your heart should come alive. The gospel is good news. Good news. Not because it doesn't deal with the hard news. That you and I are rebels in the story. We're not the heroes. We're the rebels. That's hard. That's hard news. I like to think of myself as a good guy, but I'm the rebel in the story. I'm the broken one in the story. I'm the one whose mind is distorted by the world and its lies. I'm the one who misses the mark because I love myself more than I love you. But God is the good hero in the story. He is the one willing to live with me and take me back despite all my mistakes, all my selfishness, all of it. He does the thing that can bring me back. That's good news, even though it includes some hard truth. In our exaltation, the changing of our heart cannot and should not be left only in internal satisfaction, but should be proclaimed externally as we lift the name of Jesus. Verse 4 says it right there. Bless His name. That's a command. Make His name great. Make sure people don't think you're the hero of the story. Tell them that you're not, but that the hero is quite good. He's quite loving. He's like a shepherd, in fact, and He'd lay down His life for any of His sheep. People need to know. People need to be educated. And finally, they need to be educated in what? Look at verse 5. His faithful love endures forever. His faithfulness through all generations. Okay, if you don't know this about God, your exaltation and exultation will be muted. If you think God's only good for you here and now in your life, you live, you won't get it. God says, I need you to know that my plans are eternal. Not just worried about here or the next 100 or the next 1,000. I'm worried about eternity. I'm doing something, I'm extending this goodness forever. And I'm inviting you into my forever plan. And I'm not just inviting you in, but I'm inviting your children and your children's children and your children's children's children to every generation. We do not serve a God of the here and now. We serve a God of eternity. His plan doesn't end with this world. He will remake this world. There is going to be a new heavens and a new earth. You need to know that, because if you don't know that, if you don't have an education in that, if you don't understand that, your exultation and exaltation will be muted to match the timeline. But the timeline is grand. That's why when I sing songs about God's eternal plan, there's probably no other thing that brings my heart alive into exultation with a U. Like songs like The Blessing. Man, when I sing this song, it says this: may his favor be upon you in 1,000 generations, and your family and your children and their children and their children. When I sing that song, I can't tell you what happens to me. It's wild. It's deep. Or like last week we sang the song, I Speak Jesus. And man, if you were near me, you might have got snotted on, because I was like all over. So I sit in the front row. I mean, I was just weeping as it says, I speak Jesus for my family. I mean, this gets me going when I know about the eternal plans of God to the generations. Because I won't be there. God will be there. He will make himself known to my children's children's children. I mean, the amount of exaltation that brings me into, and the volume increase of my singing when I sing of the eternal plans of God to the generations. It's like nothing else for me. To know that my God is like this, for me and not just for me, is incredible. And so as I was thinking about this week, I thought there's a great example of this in the New Testament. And it's in Acts 17, 22 to 31. And comes from the Apostle Paul, who is on a mission to share this knowledge of this God, of the Psalm 100 God, of the person of Jesus Christ, of his death and resurrection. He wants to share it with the world, and he ends up in the country of Greece, in the city of Athens. And I've been to this place when I visited our ministry partners over there. And I stood where he stood. And this is what Paul said. Because Greece is a place of philosophies and new ideas, and there were gods everywhere. There were temples to all sorts of different gods there, and people like to talk about these sorts of things in the marketplace. And Paul started talking about his God, and people said, oh, you seem to have a new God to introduce. And so they brought him up to this place called Mars Hill. And it says this in verse 22, chapter 17 of Acts. Then Paul stood in the middle of the Areopagus, and he said, men of Athens, I see that you are extremely religious in every respect. For I was passing through town, I was observing the objects of your worship. I even found an altar on which was inscribed, to an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you, that God who made the world and everything in it, he is Lord of heaven and earth. And he does not live in shrines made by human hands. Neither is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives everyone life and breath and all things. For one man he has made From one man he has made every nationality to live over the whole earth, and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. He did this so they might seek God, and perhaps they might reach out and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and exist, as even some of your own poets have said. For, here he's quoting their poets, for we are also his offspring. Being God's offspring, then, we shouldn't think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, an image fashioned by human art and imagination. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God now commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has set a day when he is going to judge the world in righteousness by the man he has appointed. He, that is the one true God, has provided proof to this to everyone by raising him, that's Jesus, the Son, from the dead. Know this, Paul says. So here's my big application. Just one. And this is something I do. So you might not need this, but I bet you probably do. When I'm feeling a lack of exaltation, which means that I'm not singing much, I'm not sharing much, I'm not attending the gatherings of God much, I'm not entering the gates to the throne room of God either in prayer or with his people, or I am not doing the acts of exultation, which is to say, maybe I'm doing the acts of exaltation. Maybe I am going to church. Maybe I am singing on Sundays. Maybe I am sharing. Maybe I'm attending cohort or cadre. But I'm not doing it with a full heart. It's lackluster. It's cold. It's lifeless. I'm doing the actions of exaltation, but I'm not exalting God in my heart. The passion is gone. If I'm missing that or that, my personal, and I think it's a biblical instinct, is to return to the act of education. I start reading apologetics books. It's the funniest thing. Ryan knows this. Talk to Ryan. Like when I'm feeling low, I go read really dense apologetics books to remind myself, oh yeah, I'm not an idiot to believe in God. He makes the most sense. I'll read great works of theology to inspire me to the greatness of God because I've forgotten. Of course, I go to the source text and I read all I can about this God who's revealed himself in words that I can read. And I begin to remember, oh yeah, he is there. He is personal. He is my shepherd. He's good. And his faithfulness lasts forever. He has a plan for me and my family. God, you're so good. I'm going to go sing this Sunday like I haven't sang in a while, with a heart full, with my mind being transformed, being renewed. God, I see you again. I'd lost sight for a sec, but now I'm starting to see clearly again. I can't wait to sing of your goodness. Let's pray.